You are listening to the Stop Binge Eating podcast with Kirsten Sarfty, episode number 155. Welcome to the Stop Binge Eating podcast. It's time for you to end your food obsession and begin feeling confident and in control around food. You are absolutely capable of eliminating binge eating from your life, and I'm going to show you how by giving you simple tools and insights that you can apply in your own life. I'm your host, Kirsten Sarfty. Now let's get to it. Hello, how are you? I am so good. I just had a super fun weekend down in Providence, Rhode Island at a wedding where two of my good friends got married. And I got to see some friends I hadn't seen in such a long time, and I made some new friends, and I danced a lot. And I thought it was funny because I was concerned about the reception being semi-outside and being too cold, but yeah, that was not a problem because I was sweaty. Anyway, it was so nice to take a weekend away and have such good times with friends and check out a city I've never been to. Yay for the world opening up. All right, now let's talk about intentional thinking and also unintentional thinking. There's thoughts you think on purpose that you want to be thinking, and the thoughts that just come into your mind that you don't want to be thinking. Whether you want to be thinking certain thoughts or not will usually come down to how you feel and act when you think that way, and ultimately the result you get from thinking that way. Because your thoughts don't just stand alone. How you think will affect your feelings, actions, and results. And if you aren't purposeful with your thinking, you won't be purposeful with how you feel and act. When you binge, there is some unintentional thinking going on before the binge begins. And there's also unintentional thinking going on throughout your whole binge, even if you don't realize it. A lot of the time, people tell me that they're not thinking anything when they're in the midst of a binge, but there are some thoughts happening, even if you don't realize it. If you take a moment to pay attention, you'll hear something. And here's some thoughts you might hear. I need more. I can't stop. I'm going to have some of that now. I'm so disgusting. This is so gross. I shouldn't be doing this. Those are some unintentional thoughts. They're thoughts that you're not thinking on purpose. And they're also ones that aren't going to necessarily stop you from eating more, and you're not going to feel good when you think them. If you think you can't stop, you won't stop. You'll feel defeated or hopeless, and then just keep going. If you think you shouldn't be doing this, you're not making a definitive decision to stop eating. You're just making yourself feel guilty about what you're doing. And that guilt isn't driving you to stop. Then there's the unintentional thoughts that you might think before a binge. This one time won't hurt. I already ate all that, so I might as well just keep eating. This is my chance to eat all the food. I have to do it. I can't feel this urge anymore. These ones are making binge eating sound urgent and important, or they're justifying it. And because of that, they're also thoughts you probably don't want to be thinking. You don't want to excuse and justify binging, and you don't want it to be something that's urgent and important. But sometimes you think thoughts like these, and like the ones that I listed that people think during binges, and you think them, you believe them, and you begin or continue to eat. And they may seem so true, especially because they're coming from your own brain. But just because your brain said it doesn't mean it's true. You don't have to believe everything your brain tells you, and you don't have to agree. But the problem is that you might actually agree a little. Even when you're outside of the moment, when your brain is telling you these things, and when you're outside of the moment that you're feeling an urge, you might believe them somewhat. That's why it's hard for you to dismiss those thoughts away and call BS on them. There might be a part of you right now when you're not feeling an urge that thinks that you can't stop eating once you start. Or that when no one is around, you kind of do want to eat a bunch of food. Or that you can't feel an urge all the way through. If you're believing those right now, even a little bit, it's going to be more challenging to dismiss them and choose to think the opposite when you're feeling an urge to binge. And then there's the ones that you see as true right now, and you think the opposite isn't true. Like, this is disgusting and I shouldn't be doing this. That may sound legit, but it's not going to be useful. Like I said before, those are not going to stop you. What stops you is you deciding you're going to stop. This is disgusting, so I'm stopping. I shouldn't be doing this, so I'm stopping. And then following through on that decision. When you think this is disgusting and I shouldn't be doing this, although you may believe it to be true, it's not useful to think that. It's just going to make you feel bad about what you're doing. So when it comes to binge eating, you're unintentionally thinking thoughts that aren't useful. They're making you feel bad. They're justifying binges, and they're making binge eating seem necessary in your mind. And you're just going along with what your brain is saying and believing the thoughts that it's giving to you. So if you want to not binge and not continue eating and not start eating, you have to be the decider of your thoughts. Instead of being on autopilot and letting your brain's thoughts take you down the path toward binge eating, you tell your brain what you want to think that will take you down the path away from binge eating. Autopilot is a choice. Awareness and paying attention is a choice. You can choose to observe your thinking or not. You can choose to talk to your brain or just listen and agree. One of the most amazing things about being a human is that we get to have conversations with ourselves and not just be instinctual all the time and not just do everything that comes to our mind. We get to make decisions and we get to think intentionally and tell ourselves what we want to be thinking. We get to be intentional about how we feel and act because we get to be intentional about our thinking. Now, that doesn't mean we can always convince ourselves of new beliefs in an instant or change how we feel in an instant. We're not going to have full control over every single thought we think or every emotion we feel, but you have more authority over it than you're giving yourself credit for. Your thoughts are not set in stone, and you don't have to agree with every thought that comes into your mind, especially your thoughts about binge eating being a good idea or something that you have to do. So this is what I recommend you do. Just as I did a few minutes ago, make a list of all your unuseful, unintentional thoughts that you think before a binge that drives you into a binge and the ones you think when you're binging. And then make another list of the useful thoughts that you want to intentionally think on purpose. What do you want to be thinking? And think what you want. Deliberately put thoughts into your mind that you want to be thinking. Tell your brain what you want to be thinking. And don't just wait until you're feeling the urges to teach your brain how you want to be thinking. Take moments to teach it all throughout your day. It's like if you're trying to teach a toddler a new way of doing something, it's going to be better received if you do it when they're calm, not when they're all worked up and emotional. And the same goes for your brain. It will better retain your intentional thoughts when you're teaching them to it in a calm state rather than an urgy state or emotional state. Too often we get stuck in cycles of just thinking a certain way that isn't serving us without making any attempts at changing because we think the thoughts are just true and that's just how we think. But you can intentionally change it, even when it comes to your binge thoughts. You can teach your brain new ways of thinking, and you've already done it many times in your life. And the good news when it comes to binge eating is that you don't have to convince yourself of a lot of what you want to be thinking. You already believe it. You already believe that you don't have to throw in the towel if you eat a dessert or a snack off plan. You already believe that binging isn't what you want to be doing when no one is around. You already believe that you'll feel awful if you binge. And if there's thoughts that you want to be believing, that you want to think intentionally that you don't believe yet, and it does feel like you're trying to convince yourself, then that thought just isn't your next step. Your next step is a bridging thought that you do believe, that's somewhere in between your unintentional thought and then the intentional thought that you want to be thinking. So if you don't believe that you can feel an urge all the way through until it passes, if you don't believe that intentional thought that you want to be thinking on purpose, you can intentionally instead think something like, I'm learning to feel my urges, or It's possible I can learn to feel my urges. Those will feel better than just thinking, I can't feel my urges, and will put you in an emotional state that will more likely allow for you to actually practice allowing urges. So be more intentional about what thoughts you think to yourself. Choose to pay attention to your thoughts and listen to yourself. And when you hear a thought that isn't useful, intentionally think what you want to think. And one last thing about thinking intentionally. You may think something intentionally about binging or about your capabilities, but it doesn't override the previous thought, that unuseful thought, and you still feel an urge to binge. At that point, you can intentionally choose how you want to think about feeling that urge. A lot of you just start thinking about how awful it feels and how unbearable it is and how scary it is and how you won't be able to do it. And these thoughts make it more difficult for you to allow yourself to feel it until it passes. So if you're intentionally thinking about your urge in a useful way, what are you going to choose to think? Teach your brain a new way of thinking about urges, so it's not just jumping to thinking how scary it is. It's okay to feel urges. They won't kill you. You are capable of feeling. It's just temporary. Those are just some options for you for what you can choose to think intentionally about your urges. But you can find whatever you believe is true about your urges that will be more useful than the unintentional, unuseful thoughts that have been coming up for you. All right, so be more intentional about the thoughts you put into your head and the thoughts you dismiss away as unuseful. Be the manager of your thoughts. Pay attention and be deliberate about what goes in and what stays when it comes to what you think about yourself, about binge eating, and about your urges. Okay, I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Stop Binge Eating podcast. If you like what you heard today and you want more, go to coachkir.com/free. That's COACHKIR.com/free to get some awesome free stuff to help you stop binge eating.